Looking back, Science 10, this is the last section in the CD1 booklet, D 3.3, assessing the impacts of climate change. Okay, so we'll go through this, and there's a short assignment at the end, of course. Canada is a relatively cold nation, so global warming might seem to be appealing. If global warming leads to climate change, however, there could be significant consequences to human life. Climate change might cause an increase in severe weather, such as hurricanes, tornadoes, and thunderstorms. These could cause damage to property, crops, livestock, and even loss to life. Climate change could increase the number and intensity of droughts, which could cause crop failures and forest fires, as seen here, damaging agriculture. Currently speaking, when I made this video, the Fort McMurray fires had just happened a month ago, and of course a lot of dry weather could lead to that. So that's something that could happen with climate change, extreme drought. Damaging for agriculture, forestry, tourism, etc. Higher temperatures might cause more polar ice to melt, raising sea levels worldwide and flooding or eroding coastal communities. Climate change could also increase the intensity and length of heat waves. So we often think in Canada, yes, it'd be great if we could warm things up, but severe climate often happens with climate change, severe weather. Climate change would not just affect human life. If significant climate change occurs, then the biomes on our planet would also change. More northern regions would be impacted the most. If the current warming trend in Earth's average temperature continues, the region of ice coverage would shrink, reducing the habitat of Arctic and Antarctic species. Figure D 3.22 shows one of the predictions of changes of the vegetation in Canada as a result of climate change. So you can see what happened. Basically, everything would shift upwards. So the grassland here in our region of Saskatchewan would shift upwards. Desert would be included in southern Saskatchewan, etc. So you can see all of the warming trends shift up. The taiga, deciduous forest, all shift upwards. As the ice receded, the albedo of Earth's polar regions would also decrease, so there'd be less reflection of UV rays. As a result, more solar energy would be absorbed, increasing the rate at which warming of the poles occurred. Permafrost would also begin to thaw, leaving behind rotting vegetation that would increase the rate of emission of methane, a greenhouse gas, which would increase the rate of global warming even more. So you can see, lose snow cover, you reduce albedo, of course rotting vegetation, etc. would help lead to more greenhouse gases being formed. Impacts of climate change on Saskatchewan, the agriculture and forestry industries, and the health of Albertans or people from Saskatchewan could be affected by climate change. The biome of Alberta could also be affected, which would change the amount of suitable habitat for some species. Droughts would be the big thing. Droughts are predicted to become more frequent if climate change occurs. If average temperature increases, water will evaporate from soil more quickly. Without careful management, crop yields could drop 10 to 30% as a result. To compensate, agriculture workers might have to change the crops they grow and when they plant. For example, since winter wheat can grow in dry conditions, Alberta's farmers might have to change from moisture-loving canola to this crop. Changing crops can also cause economic loss since different crops have different worth per acre. Agriculture in the more northern areas of Alberta and Saskatchewan might benefit from climate change. Warmer temperatures would mean longer growing seasons and increased crop yields. But insect populations are also predicted to increase with warmer temperatures. And of course, insects will attack crops. So climate change could be damaging to agriculture overall. So even though, yes, we have longer warm weather, but of course, there's something else. Insects could also reach higher populations than usual and consume those crops. Forests could also be affected by climate change. Drier conditions would slow the growth of forests and increase the risk of forest fires. As with crop plants, the retreat of ice cover could allow trees to grow farther north than they do now. However, warmer temperatures could also increase the population of insects again, and that could harm forests, such as the spruce budworm. These consequences of climate change could harm both forestry industry and the wildlife that depends upon forests for their habitat. Climate change occurs too quickly. Natural ecosystems, protected areas, and wildlife in Alberta and Saskatchewan would have to adapt quickly to the new climate conditions. Some species would not survive. For example, plant species that cannot survive the new climate conditions would die out, and other species would move in. This would shift the boundaries of biomes or areas. Shrinking of the tundra and taiga biomes would mean far less habitat for organisms that live in these biomes. Animals that depend upon wetlands, such as the trumpeter swan, would also be at risk for extinction. Warmer temperatures could also affect the health of people who live in provinces such as Alberta and Saskatchewan. Climate change caused longer and more intense heat waves. Air pollution in larger urban areas would worsen. People with respiratory diseases such as asthma could suffer even more illness. Diseases associated with insects in warmer areas would also increase in Alberta and Saskatchewan. For example, Lyme disease is spread by insects, by species of ticks that cannot survive cold temperatures. This tick could survive if the average temperature continues to increase, and people in Alberta and Saskatchewan would be at risk of this disease for the first time. So you can see with heating up, there are certain changes that you may not think of that could in fact happen. All right, we'll skip this page. Canada's action plan on climate change. Figure D 3.26 shows the contribution made by different sectors of Canadian society to greenhouse gas emissions in 1998. The Government of Canada has developed an action plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in those sectors that impact greenhouse gas emissions the most. So, looking at the transportation industry, agriculture and forestry, buildings, oil and gas, electricity. So if you take a look at some of the things here, the sector that's mentioned in this graph and the actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So if we look at transportation, develop more fuel-efficient vehicles so they don't have to use as much gas. Increase use of fuels that produce less carbon dioxide, such as ethanol. So some gas stations have ethanol blended in their gasoline. Develop technologies to reduce or eliminate emissions, such as hydrogen-powered fuel cells. Encourage efficiencies in the transportation of freight, and encourage more use of public transit. In the energy sector, find and create suitable carbon dioxide capture and storage sites. So we mentioned some of those previously. Work with oil and gas sector to improve energy efficiency. Support the development of emerging renewable energy sources that do not emit greenhouse gas, such as solar and wind energy. So of course we see more of these popping up all the time. Educate Canadian citizens on how they can act to reduce greenhouse gas emissions contributed by their personal actions. Buildings. Encourage businesses to make renovations that use more energy efficient heating and cooling systems. Promote construction of energy efficient residential housing. Improve energy efficient standards for household appliances. So we see that happening. More energy efficient appliances. Certain rewards given if you make your house more energy efficient. Agriculture and forestry. Promote best practices in fertile application and in soil and livestock management. Promote the planting of trees in areas where no trees previously existed. Industry, of course, conduct energy efficient audits to identify further areas for improvement. So industry are constantly being audited, checked out to see if they're using energy efficient methods. Support the use of renewable energies such as biomass, solar energy, and geothermal energy for heating as opposed to coal and oil. Balancing environmental, social, and economic goals. Although the Government of Canada has ratified the Kyoto Protocol, some Canadians think this agreement is not the best way to proceed. Some believe it will be impossible for Canada to meet the objectives of the protocol unless major changes are implemented soon, despite some economic costs. Others are concerned that the economic impacts of the Kyoto Protocol will be too severe and so will not allow sustainable development of the resources. So doing what we need to do to survive as Canada. In 2002, the Government of Alberta produced its own action plan against human impact on climate called Albertans and Climate Change. This plan offered alternative ways to reduce greenhouse gas emissions other than those required by the Kyoto Protocol. However Canadians proceed, we will all need to be involved in the decision related to climate change. For example, oil, gas, and electricity production accounts for 35% of Canada's greenhouse gases. If a reduction is to be made, everyone must reduce their energy use, for one thing. No one group of people, political party, or company can do it all alone. We all require an effort by everyone to change their present usage of energy if emissions of greenhouse gases are to be reduced. Okay? Such a good place to end off with that. We all have a part to play in helping reducing greenhouse gases to help alleviate major climate change. So here, the last assignment, folks, 3.3, assessing the impacts of climate change. And again, here, you're welcome. I've given you hints here as to where to find these. Number 1, describe at least 3 consequences of climate change in Canada. So page 426, you'll find that. Why would tundra biomes be impacted more by climate change than other biomes? Page 426 again. Explain why climate change could change the boundaries of the planet's biomes or specific areas where that species live. Page 426. Outline the potential consequences of climate change on the agriculture industry in Alberta or Saskatchewan. Page 427. 5. Describe the potential consequences of warmer temperatures on the forests of Alberta or Saskatchewan. Page 427. State the sectors that the Government of Canada has targeted as its focus for the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Page 429. List 5 ways the transportation sector could reduce greenhouse gas emissions. 429. And we'll skip 8, skip 9, 10, 11, 12. Number 13, those are a good one. Use print and electronic resources, likely electronic resources, to find the current status of Canada with respect to the Kyoto Protocol. So I've kind of hinted as to where it is, but I would like you to look up and see exactly where are we at with this. Summarize your findings in 1 or 2 paragraphs. So you won't find that on a specific page in this text. You'll have to look it up on the internet, look up a Wikipedia site, and you'll be able to find that answer. All right, we'll see you again.